You have almost certainly seen this star. A clean five-pointed star, drawn in a single unbroken line, the kind a child makes without lifting the pen. It is stamped on paper talismans sold at Japanese shrines. It is carved into stone at a shrine in the middle of Kyoto. And right now it is glowing on millions of screens, in a hit mobile game and a run of films, as the seal of the most famous sorcerer in Japanese history. His name is Abe no Seimei, and in the stories, he is a wizard. He commands invisible spirits called shikigami, and sends them to do his bidding. He sees demons that no one else can see. He was born, the legends say, to a white fox who took the form of a woman, and that is why his eyes can pierce the other world. He is the face of an entire aesthetic, the world of Onmyoji, that now fills games and movies far beyond Japan. And almost everyone who knows that star takes it for a mark of magic. But it is also a diagram. Each of its 5 points stands for something, and the lines between them mean something exact. And once you can read it, it is no longer just a wizard's sign, but a machine for thinking about the entire world. And the man whose seal it became was not, in the records that survive from his own lifetime, a sorcerer at all. He was a real official of the Japanese court, a man who read the night sky and set the calendar for emperors. So this is not the story of the wizard in the films. It is the story of the star, and of the real craft and the real man that the legend was slowly built on top of. We are going to start with the star itself and open it one layer at a time. So, look at the star, and forget for a moment that anyone ever called it magic. In the system Seimei worked inside, the 5 points are not weapons or spells. They are the 5 phases, the foundation of an old cosmology with deep roots in China, which Japan had absorbed centuries before he was born and then developed into a system of its own. Wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Not 5 substances, exactly, but 5 ways the world moves, 5 stages that everything passes through, from the seasons to the organs of the body to the turning of the planets. And the phases are bound together by 2 cycles, which is where the star comes from. The first cycle is creation. Wood feeds fire, fire falls to ash and earth, earth hardens into metal, metal gathers water like dew on a cold blade, and water feeds the growing wood, closing the ring. Arrange the 5 phases in that order around a circle, and you have the friendly cycle, each giving birth to the next. But there is a second cycle, the one that actually draws the star. It is the cycle of control, of one phase overcoming another. Wood breaks open the earth with its roots. Earth dams and swallows water. Water puts out fire. Fire melts metal, and metal cuts wood. Now draw a line from each phase to the one it controls, skipping across the circle instead of stepping around it, and the lines fall into a perfect 5-pointed star. That is what the star is. It is a picture of how the forces of the world hold each other in check. Put the 2 great polarities over it, the dark and the light, the yin and the yang, and you have the whole engine. The Japanese called this way of knowing Onmyodo, the way of yin and yang, and its practitioners used a turning board, a small model of heaven and earth, to read the configuration of any moment. Give the system a date, a direction, an illness, a disaster, and it will tell you which phase is out of balance and what is needed to set it right. Hold on to that, because every single thing the real Seimei did, and everything the legend later turned into sorcery, runs on this quiet diagram. A system like that does not live in one wizard's head. It needs an institution, and the Japanese state built one. It was called the Onmyodo, the Bureau of Onmyo, a real government office with a real budget and a staff of trained officials. The men inside it were not magicians in robes. They were civil servants of the cosmos. Some were doctors of the calendar, who calculated and issued the official calendar the whole country lived by. Some were doctors of astronomy, who watched the night sky and reported anything unusual to the throne. Some kept the water clocks that measured the hours, and some were diviners, trained to read the turning board and answer the court's questions. It was, in its way, the Heian State's Bureau of Science and Time. And it is into this office, sometime in the 10th century, that the real Abe no Seimei walks. Here is the first surprise. The documented man is thin, especially at the start. His birth, by tradition, around the year 921, and almost everything about his youth are barely recorded. He does not burst onto the scene as a prodigy. He appears clearly in the record only in middle and old age, rising slowly through the bureau until he became a doctor of astronomy, one of its senior posts. And then he served at the very center of power. He worked for emperors, and above all, for the most powerful man of the age, Fujiwara no Michinaga, who effectively ruled Japan. We are not guessing at this. We can read it in the diaries those men kept, in their own hand, day by day. Michinaga's own journal, and the journals of other senior courtiers, record Seimei performing divinations, choosing auspicious dates, leading rites of purification, and reading the meaning of omens, with real dates attached. The most famous sorcerer in Japan turns out to be, in the contemporary record, a trusted senior technician of the court. He lived a long life and died, an old man in his 80s, around the year 1005. And 2 years after his death, by order of the emperor, a shrine was raised on the site of his Kyoto home. It is still there, and it is still stamped with that same 5-pointed star. And by the time those stones were laid, the making of the legend had already begun. But wait, you might say. Divinations, purification rites, reading omens. That does not sound like a scientist. That sounds like a magician after all. And this is the most important thing to understand about the real Abe no Seimei, because the question itself is a trap. We draw a hard line between science and sorcery. The Heian court did not draw that line anywhere. To them, it was one craft. The same official who calculated the calendar also read an eclipse, when the sun was swallowed in daylight, as a grave warning aimed at the throne. A comet, a strange-colored cloud, an earthquake were not separate from astronomy. They were astronomy's political meaning, messages about the health of the realm that the court desperately needed decoded. Reading the sky and reading fate were the same act. Consider the practice that ran every aristocrat's daily life, the directional taboos. On certain days, certain directions were closed, governed by wandering unlucky deities, and to travel straight into a blocked direction invited disaster. So a noble who needed to go that way would first travel somewhere else, spend a night, and approach his true destination from a permitted angle. Working out which directions were safe, on which day, for whom, was the Onmyoji's daily labor, and the whole court arranged its movements around his answers. And then there was the fear that hung over everything, the vengeful dead. The Heian aristocracy genuinely believed that a person wronged in life, who died in bitterness, could return as a furious spirit and strike the living with plague, with lightning, with madness. The most feared of all was a brilliant scholar exiled and dead in disgrace, who was blamed for years of disaster afterward, and by the court's own account was enshrined as a god to calm his rage, and who is honored as a deity in Japan to this day. When an epidemic swept the capital, when the emperor fell ill, when the rains failed, the court turned to the Onmyodo to diagnose the unseen cause and prescribe the rite that would set it right. So the supernatural duties were not a sideline, they were the job. Calendar and eclipse, direction and divination, omen and exorcism, all of it one office, one seamless way of seeing. To ask whether Abe no Seimei was a scientist or a sorcerer is to hold up a ruler the Heian world never owned. He was a master of a single craft in which the stars, the calendar, the spirits, and the state were all the same system, every reading of it running on the same 5 phases the star lays out. And that craft, half lost and wholly strange to later eyes, is the soil the legend grew in. Once the real man was gone, the tales began to climb over him, and you can watch them thicken century by century. The first great crop comes about 100 years after his death, in a vast collection of tales called Konjaku Monogatari. There, Seimei is already more than an official. He commands shikigami, invisible spirit servants he can send out to perform tasks, even in one story, to kill. He perceives a demon passing in a procession that no one else can see. He outwits rivals with a glance. The stories that follow only raise the stakes. The shikigami even gain a home. The legend says he kept them hidden beneath a bridge in the capital, the Bridge of Return, because his wife was frightened of their faces. A great rival steps onto the stage, a dark Onmyoji named Ashiya Doman, and the two duel in contests of divination, sealing objects in boxes and naming what is inside, and Seimei always wins. And then comes the most famous edition of all, the one almost everyone knows, his mother the fox. The story goes that Seimei's father rescued a white fox who took the shape of a beautiful woman, married him, and bore a son, before her animal nature was discovered and she slipped back into the wild, leaving behind a poem and a child with one foot in the spirit world. It is a beautiful story. It is also almost entirely a creation of the Edo period. The Fox Mother belongs above all to its storybooks and its puppet and kabuki theater, written 7 centuries after the real Seimei lived. She is nowhere in the records of his own time. She is a gift from the playwrights. And by the end of the Edo period, the transformation is complete. The calendar official is now a fox-blooded sorcerer, the hero of plays and woodblock prints, and his attributed seal, that 5-pointed star, has become the universal sign of his power. Notice what has happened. The layers have turned upside down. The technician became the supernatural core. The ordinary craft of a vanished worldview became wizardry, and a cosmological diagram became a charm of magic. And then, in our own time, the star left Japan and went around the world. It began with books. In the 1980s, the novelist Yume Makura Baku started a series of stories that reimagined Seimei as an elegant, cool, almost modern figure, a Heian aristocrat solving eerie cases with a faint smile. And they became a phenomenon. An acclaimed manga followed. Then, in the year 2001, a film cast a renowned classical stage actor as Seimei and made him an icon of Japanese cinema, the calm, beautiful sorcerer in white. And then came the screens that reach everyone, a mobile game built entirely around Seimei and his shikigami, released in 2016, carried him to an enormous audience across China and far beyond, and turned a Heian court official into a roster of collectible spirits. Chinese blockbuster films followed, drawing on that game and those novels. A new Japanese film put a young Seimei back in cinemas and onto a global streaming service. An animated series introduced him once more to viewers who had never heard of the Onmyodo. And through every version, across every language and medium, one thing stays constant: the 5-pointed star. On the talisman, on the shrine charm, on the game interface, on the movie poster, it is the same star, the seal tradition fixed to his name, tracing the same 5 phases the Bureau read the world by 1,000 years ago. The strange result is that the icon is now everywhere, and the man has almost vanished behind it. Hundreds of millions know the star. Very few know that it was ever a diagram, or that the wizard was once a working official who watched the sky for a living. So come back, one last time, to the star. You have seen it your whole life, and now you can actually read it. Not just a wizard's mark, but a picture of 5 phases holding one another in balance. The order the Heian court used to make sense of time and sickness and fear. And read that way, the real Abe no Seimei does not shrink. He loses the fox blood and the paper spirits, and he becomes something stranger and more real than the wizard. A man who stood at the exact point where his whole civilization believed the stars, the calendar, the unseen dead, and the fate of the state were one single thing, and who was trusted by the most powerful people alive to read it. The seal that tradition fixed to his name, and the 5 phases it traces, point to the same thing 1,000 years on. And that thing is not magic. It is a lost way of seeing the world, a craft in which to predict an eclipse and to calm an angry ghost were the very same act. 2 halves of one attempt to find the order hidden inside events. Maybe that is why we keep the star, why it's spread across our screens instead of fading into a museum. We still want what it quietly promises, that the chaos around us is not really chaos, that there is a pattern beneath it, and that somewhere there is someone who can read it. The wizard is the wish, and the diagram is the real inheritance, and the man, the real one, was simply someone who learned to read.